the current politics. And this one, I guess you might recognize who's the person in the middle. So this is a picture of very much of maybe great ideals that get threatened by monsters. The title of this is "No te escaparás" or "You will not escape." Sort of like a flirtatious character here, surrounded by some kind of monsters of corruption. Who knows? Let me just keep moving with the next. This one is. I don't know, do we have this in the show? Okay, great, this is in the exhibition. I made this print for the inauguration of Obama's presidency, and I did this in the fall of 2008. And it's called Atlas and the Arugulas. I made this because Obama, at some point in one of his interviews, he said that he liked arugulas. So I decided to make an army of arugulas. Let me just show you the arugulas. Here they are. They're all green. So a lot of green people here. And on top of the world is Hillary Clinton with a violin, very happy. And on the lower side is Joe Biden, the vice president, and the first lady, Michelle Obama, right behind him. The thing I didn't plan, but it turned out to be kind of prophetic in a way, is that the carriage, this is like a carriage for an inauguration of a king in Europe. The carriage doesn't have any wheels. So no matter how hard they are hitting the horses, it looks like it's not moving anywhere. It's kind of like an unfortunate description of what was about to come a few years later. I have another print by him. This is called The Headache. And this is another kind of like a forgery I did after British satirist. It's, oh my gosh, George Cruikshank. George has a lot of prints, and in Philadelphia, the Rosenbach Library and Museum has about 4,000 of these prints, and they commissioned me to do a print with anything from their collection. So I found this print by Cruikshank, and I decided to replace the face. So here we see the president being tortured by all kinds of demons, red and blue, and maybe some demons of his own creation. I don't know. This is one of my favorite drawings, and it's right here at the collection of René. And you know, as you will see, I have another recurrent issue in my work, which is about immigration. For me, immigration is something that happens to improve the life of people, no matter what country we are. Immigration happens everywhere, in Europe, in Latin America, in this country. And it's just a human experience when people move from one place to another. And personally, you know, since I am an immigrant, for me, immigration is an inner change when you move from one place to another. It's not a change of passport. It's actually a cultural change inside of us. If you ever move to a very distant country, let's say you go to China and move there forever or permanently, you will see that suddenly some of you become Chinese. Some of you keep the same old American that you were before. And eventually you become from one place and from many other places at the same time. That's pretty much how I feel today. I became an American citizen many years ago. And for me, again, I think I became more of an American citizen even before I have my papers. So it's all relative. But then the citizenship is just, as I say, one aspect. The other aspect is when you realize that people have borders that are kind of invisible but real. And the borders could be many kinds of borders, not just geographic. They're cultural, they are religious, they are political, they are gender-based. I mean, we think of a huge list of borders. And for me, it's a puzzle because they just basically differentiate diversity. And diversity for me is something that enriches everybody's life. Although in some places of the world, differences are used against ourselves. So in any case, this drawing expresses that kind of feelings where there is a collision of cultures, that something, it's really as beautiful as this little girl that is levitating this heart, and it's about to be flicked, just like in the middle of the finger, you could read English only. Let me talk about my books, because they got me in trouble lately, so we could get into that. I began to make books back in 1991. When I read about the destruction of the pre-Columbian books, I don't know, you probably have heard about the destructions of books in the Alexandrian library, how much of a tragedy that was. It was burned so many times. And that was mostly for religious reasons. Christian groups decided that was a lot of paganism behind that library. And that luckily many treasures survived the fire from the Alexandrian library. I mean, it's been said, a lot of the Greek philosophy was there, but also apparently like the Egyptians knew how to use batteries like the way we use them today for electricity, and that's a mystery what they were doing with that. So things like that were preserved locally. In the Americas, so in pre-Columbian times, the biggest library was in Mexico, in the Aztec Kingdom, and in the subkingdom of Texcoco. The library of Texcoco was built by an Aztec king who was against human sacrifices. That's something you're not going to hear in a Mel Gibson movie. This Aztec king, King Netza, or Netzahualcoyotl, the feather coyote, King Netza organized festivals of poetry. He was an architect. He basically was a philosopher. And he built up this library that was full, according to indigenous people that survived, this library was full of books of medicinal knowledge. They were like amazing, they have an amazing knowledge of herboriary medicine. They knew how to use penicillin, for instance, among other things. People might claim also they were great heart surgeons because of the sacrifices, but there was a huge wealth of knowledge in that library. There was, they have a more accurate calendar than the one of the Europeans at the time. The Gregorian calendar was off compared to, they have their leap years. They have to correct them every 4 years. The Aztecs have to correct their calendar every 52 years. So they have a very accurate calendar. Nobody knows how they calculated that because those books are gone. Anyway, so during the conquest, when the books were piled up, many Indians committed suicide, and the whole library was burned. Till today, there is a zero number of Aztec books, that pre-Columbian, that is, pre-Columbian books. There are some Aztec books that were painted immediately after the conquest, but there is no pre-Columbian Aztec books that survived the fire. There are only 3 Mayan books that survive. There was a single priest, Fray Diego de Landa. He alone burned pretty much all of the Mayan books. Everywhere he went, he piled them up and burned them. Eventually, he regretted it and began to interview Mayan Indians to rewrite their books like the Popol Vuh, which is sort of like the Bible of the Mayans, was written that way. But in any case, there is also other 19 books from the Oaxaca region, from the Mixtec, Zapotec cultures. So altogether, there are about 22 pre-Columbian books. So when I read about this history, I decided, well, this kind of history is made, like people who conquer other cultures end up burning their books and then rewrite history. So I decided in that sense, history is so subjective. It's so full of ideology, and if anything is an ideological construction, that as an artist I decided to just make maybe an artistic version of what my ideas of history might be. But anyway, so there was a cultural side taking place, and here I have an image that is part of the whole experience. In this case, there is a group of Spanish priests and a soldier here that are executing indigenous leaders who did not want to convert into Catholicism or Christianism. They didn't want to be Christianized. And they were hanged or burned. There is a great story from a Uruguayan writer, Eduardo Galeano, in his book, Memories of Fire, about an Aztec Indian who was about to be burned. And before that, the Spanish priest asked him to convert into Christianity so he could go to heaven. So the Aztec Indian asked the priest, "Are you all going to heaven?" And they say, "Yes." And the Indian say, "Well, I don't want to go to heaven." So anyway, so I decided to express a lot of my own social anxieties, my own feelings about what's going on in the world through the same style of pre-Columbian books. And one of, this is one of the books that most recent ones which is in the exhibition, and I think you could see it better in the exhibition. It's a book I did about, the economic meltdown that we're going through. A lot of the text that you will see in the book, and I invite you to see it maybe after the show, it's art talk, and it's either art talk or some economic theory, but not necessarily connected to whatever you see of the images. This is another part of the book, and it's very random. The way I connect images is very much as a collage, and they don't have a single narrative. They have more like an ambiguous statement, and usually it's the way I construct my work is kind of like sentences. When you have a phrase from one place and a phrase from another place, you have a sentence. Or actually, phrase and sentence is kind of a redundancy, isn't it? No, you have a word from one place, a word from another place, and then you make a sentence, sorry. And that's the way my books work. So, so here are other pages from that. So it's kind of like a global experience. So you have Japanese sailors with Popeye and Cuban characters in the ocean, etc. Now, one of the books that got me in trouble lately is The Misadventures of the Romantic Cannibals. And in this book,